Welcome all to today's Passive House Alberta Building Better in Alberta webinar series, sponsored by the Alberta Eco Trust. My name is Frank Crawford, and I am the Education Committee Lead for Passive House Alberta. Today, I'm happy to welcome Sean Armstrong, who is the Managing Principal of Redwood Energy, and he will be presenting on induction cooktops, their indoor health improvements versus fossil fuel cooktops, plus any other electrification questions you may have at the end. First, I'd like to thank the Alberta Eco Trust for their ongoing support of us. It is very helpful in allowing Passive House Alberta to continue our work. As always, place your questions in the chat box and I will ask them at the end, or you can unmute yourself at the end and ask them yourself. So with that, please take it away, Sean.
Okay, I'm going to go to the beginning of my slides. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. First, I'm going to introduce myself so that let's see here. Got to get my, boom, there we go. Intro slide. Hey y'all, just as introductions, I've been studying this topic. I've been studying how to incorporate renewable energy and how to electrify since 1995. Went to college for it at Humboldt State University, what it was called at the time. And there's a demonstration house there, started in 1978. And so I studied there, I taught there, I mentored, I worked, I directed it, etc. I was on the steering committee for a very long time. Um, but my sort of career in how to electrify buildings, and we're going to talk about stoves specifically today, my career started in 2005, and with this helped start a company called Danco Communities, but at the time I was working for Pacific West Companies. Anyway, it was the first all-electric development company that had been created in the country. It was just for affordable housing, like these cute little houses you see on the right-hand side. That was our nation's first development of houses that every single house is net positive and all electric back in 2014. And in the bottom, you can see this is one of my biggest, coolest projects. This is 12 stories, almost 400 apartments over in Washington, D.C. on the Beltway. And it has a 9-story tall PV wall on the parking garage, just facing the road that rings around the nation's capital. So I'm a consultant. I have about 15 staff, and we design all-electric, solar-powered, low-income housing, housing that's deed restricted for households that make less than 60% of the average or the median in a community. Okay, so that's me. I like telling stories. I think it's an easy and fun way to learn information. So first, I wanted to just like wind you back to this. The sort of I think it's fun because Niagara Falls is like the border of Canada and the United States. So we kind of share a little bit of history here, which is that there were some of the first electric cooking done in the United States was done at Niagara Falls using the hydroelectric energy. Tesla, the person, had been up there helping consult to create these new AC electric power plants. And that's how we got this biscuit, these little crackers you have in the United States called Triscuits. They were invented back then, and they made a big deal out of them being made at Niagara Falls as electric biscuits. It says baked by electricity at Niagara Falls, USA. And similarly, an American cereal called shredded wheat. Now it's owned by like Post and Kellogg. But at the time, it was just shredded wheat. And it was also started at the electric bakeries up at Niagara Falls. And I could go into all the commercial cooking reasons of like electricity being more controllable, so you can get just the right temperatures, and faster to heat up, or less dangerous, like all sorts of reasons why people do commercial cooking electrically. But I'm going to focus on home cooking today. So the nation's electric utilities, after like I started about 1900. By about 1950, they gained enough steam that they had started a television show. It was the #1 television show on Sunday nights, Live Better Electrically. And they hired Mad Men ad campaign style things here to really get into people's heads. So on the left-hand side, you can see advertisements in the 60s, and I have a lot of these, where you check off how many electric kitchen appliances you had, and then you count them up, and if you were like between 19 and 24 electric appliances, then you were a dinner duchess. But if you were in between 1 and 6, you were a galley slave. So they were really getting into the main cook of the house, the woman at the time, getting into her head and calling her names. Same thing for the men. You see these two men here. This is all very deliberate, keep in mind. And the idea of like welcoming people into your home during the holidays. What kind of, man can pull that off? It's the kind of man who has this gold medallion on their door saying they have all electric lifestyle, including, you can see at the bottom here, this flameless cooking kitchen. So, what was the point of this? The point of it was to change the National Electrical Code that's founded by the National Fire Protection Agency back in the late 1800s. The National Electrical Code, which is, there's a version of it that's adopted into Canada as well. We have very similar electrical codes. We obviously share grid infrastructure. We sell electricity back and forth across our respective boundaries. So we have a very similar electrical code. And in 1962, the US changed its national electrical code to require 100 amps of power to be delivered to every house. That's still the national code requirement. And that is enough power to have an all-electric home. So the electric utilities won, and what they wanted was every house to be able to be all electric, sort of pre-wired for it. And that happened back in the 1960s. And we're just all fulfilling on that ever since. They also started advertising how to cook on electric stoves. And they hired this former CIA spy, Julia Child. She had worked as an undercover agent during World War II in France, occupied France. And she pretended to be a culinary student while also working as a CIA spy. And then later, all of her skills, like how to cook lobsters French style that she'd learned as a CIA spy, she turned them around into a big television show. And she's a big lady. She's close to 6 feet tall, had a big voice. They've made movies about her since. But every single episode you ever saw her in, she was cooking on an electric resistant stove, like you can see here in the lower left-hand corner, because it was an electric utility on Long Island, New York, that had hired her originally to put on this show. And it's also worth noting, it's really easy when you're setting up like a soundstage kitchen, for TV. It's easy to run electricity across the floor to where in the stage you have the cooking area. This is not a house, right? And it's harder to do that on gas. Obviously not impossible or anything like that, but just for setting up any sort of temporary or easy facility, it's much easier to run electricity than gas, much safer. Now, giving you the history, I'm going to start explaining to you some of the science. So these are two different studies that were done. One on the left-hand side, methane and nitrous oxides emissions from natural gas stoves, cooktops, and ovens in residential stoves. And it says here, 21.7 nanograms of NOx per joule of energy that comes out. NOx, if you don't know, nitrous oxides, those are the constituents of smog. They cause asthma, they burn your lungs. It's a terrible chemical for you to inhale. And if you go down to the bottom of this, if you convert it into the energy units of stoves, which is in British thermal units, a British thermal unit is one matchstick burnt end to end, a wooden matchstick. So back in the day, when the British were figuring out what their thermal units should be, they said, how about we use matchsticks? So if your gas burner can burn 7,000 matchsticks worth of energy an hour, that's a 7,000 BTU per hour burner, that's the smallest ones that are sold. So the smallest burner pretty much you've ever seen was a 7,000 BTU burner. You probably saw it on a small stove in an apartment, or maybe it's in your own house. Just small ones, 7,000 BTUs, not ones that are twice as big as that you might see in like modern big stoves in wealthy people's homes. I'm just talking about the small one. If you turn it on high, because you're trying to boil water, you're creating 160 milligrams of NOx per hour. All right? That's what it means. Now, if you had it on medium, if you had it on low, it's smaller numbers, right? Could be 40 milligrams of NOx per hour if you had it on very low. Over here on the right-hand side, this is one of our national labs in the United States, the Argonne National Laboratory, and they hooked up a Ford Fusion, and they let it drive, so to speak, in the lab until it got to its normal idling state, which is a very clean, like everything's warmed up and the catalytic converter that's underneath the vehicle is engaged. The catalytic converter should remove up to 90% of the NOx that's in the gas, but it's still NOx that comes out of cars. There's so much of it that is the primary cause of smog in every city. So the question is, knowing that they produce still lots of NOx, how much NOx? So when it's idling, a car like this, just a standard sedan car, is producing 35 milligrams of NOx per hour. So the question I put to you is understanding that number is 35. Right over here, this is 160. That means that's 4.5 cars worth of NOx idling in your kitchen when you're cooking, when you're boiling water. And maybe it's only 1 car's worth of NOx when you have it on low just to keep your stove things warm, you know? Maybe just like a very low heat because you're cooking beans or something like that. That's only 1 car worth of NOx just burning continuously in your kitchen and really into your entire home because the NOx pervades your entire home. Every room gets it. It's invisible and you can't smell it. So it really doesn't play to humans' strengths, you know? And so, unfortunately, the human mind, if it can't see it, if it can't smell it, if it isn't sensed by us, it almost doesn't exist to us emotionally. But I gotta tell you that in California, one, it's, how does this go? It's, I think I should do the national uh, average a little bit easier. Basically, in California, I should say, it's about 1 in 5 kids get asthma from a gas stove. That's the only reason they got asthma is because the gas stove in their home's kitchen. 1 in 5 kids. California has the highest rate of childhood asthma because we have some of the dirtiest air. If you look at the whole country, it'd be more like 1 in 8 kids got asthma only because they had a gas stove. And it's the NOx that's in it. That's what causes asthma. It burns your lungs. Now, here's another way of looking at that same information. I'm going to read this interview and then I'm going to talk about what you're seeing on the right-hand side. Okay, kitchen smog. I'm interviewing. I say, hey, in April 2019, New Yorker article about the hidden air pollution in our homes said there is an actual smog formation in the kitchen after 20 to 30 minutes of cooking on a gas stove. Was that an exaggeration? And Dr. Brett Singer of the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, which is our nation's leading national lab on indoor air pollution, and he is the leading scientist on it. And he says, Dr. Brett Singer says, hey, if you add pollutants like nitrogen dioxide from gas stoves to the cooking emissions, meaning like the butter, the moisture that's from boiling noodles, all that stuff is also in smog. So if you add the actual nitrous oxide, the dioxide, to the cooking emissions, it is a mixture deserving of a name like smog. Although that name is already taken by outdoor air pollution. I don't know why. Then I go on and I say, Bruce Nils. Bruce Nils, you wrote in the New York Times in May of 2019, the next month, the nitrogen dioxide can easily reach levels that would be illegal outdoors. Bruce Nils, one of the leaders in our nation of the movement to shut down coal power plants, he says nitrogen dioxide is one of the main pollutants from gas stoves, and it is both linked to childhood asthma in otherwise healthy children and worsens pre-existing breathing problems. That is why the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, that's our national agency here, sets outdoor health-based standards for nitrogen dioxide. But gas stoves cause indoor nitrogen dioxide levels that can be worse than the outdoor air next to gas power plants and highways. All right? On the right-hand side, this is it's a graph that's got 2 chunks. On the right-hand side of that graph, it says 2017 outdoor air pollution. That's the nitrogen dioxide data from throughout our country, in the United States, next to every highway, next to every gas power plant, the dirtiest possible sources of outside air nitrogen dioxide. And this is what we see, 30 to 60 parts per billion. Our threshold in the United States is 100 parts per billion. It's illegal to do anything more than 100 parts per billion in outside air quality. And there's no city in our country, in the United States, that is at 100 ppb of nitrogen dioxide. All of our cities are within compliance these days. Now look on the left-hand side. This is data from the California Air Resources Board, which has an enormous database of cooking food pollutants. So you cook a dish on an electric stove and nitrogen dioxide, you're going to get 20 to 60 parts per billion. That is exclusively like the butter cooking, the olive oil in the pan, or any other fats that are being converted into nitrogen dioxide. So it's a low level. You should turn on a fan, of course, open a window, etc. One dish being cooked on gas raises the kitchen's nitrogen dioxide levels to illegal levels most of the time. You get 30 to 200 parts per billion. So criminal air. If you were making that pollution as a gas power plant company, if you were running a city and you allowed your highways or your state, any of that, it's illegal. But that's just one gas dish. And then if you're cooking a full meal on a gas stove, you start at 190 parts per billion. So that's just cooking dinner. You already have broken the law. And it goes up to 1,000 parts per billion. It's incredibly harsh on people's lungs. It lasts for hours in your house. If your kitchen, when you're cooking on gas, is getting like moisture on the windows, open the windows. The moisture is from gas burning, but that's telling you that you are now at seriously dangerous levels of gas in your kitchen, nitrogen dioxide, benzene, formaldehyde. There's like almost 300 chemicals that are produced by a gas stove. So I'm just focusing on one of the ones that's regulated as the most toxic. But some of the other ones, like formaldehyde, really poisonous chemical. Number one source of formaldehyde in your whole life is a gas stove. Now, do you have any questions? I've been sort of running at this. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to take them and like pause and go back or anything like that. But otherwise, I'll just keep on explaining stuff. Okay, I'm gonna keep on going, but you're welcome to put them into chat or raise your hand or do anything like that. So if I've hopefully convinced you to seriously consider putting in an electric stove for the sake of your pet's health, your children's health, your health, or as you're getting older, when your lungs start to not be as strong. One of the studies I didn't share with you, but I'll just verbally share quickly, is a 1994 study showing that women who are cooking over a gas stove and did not live with a cigarette smoker had the same health impacts, medication for heart attack symptoms, bronchial issues, wheeze, all the stuff that you'd get from living with a secondhand cigarette smoker. Because they studied like 700 households where the woman was cooking on an electric stove and then her husband was in the living room smoking cigarettes all day. Because this is the 1990s. And those two things are equivalent. Having a pack or two of cigarettes smoked in your house every day is equivalent to cooking on a gas stove. And it shouldn't surprise you because I want to just go back to how much pollution is coming from a gas stove compared to, say, a car. More than 4 times as much pollution per minute is coming from the gas stove than the car. So just keep that in mind. Like, this is real, intense amounts of pollution, illegal amounts of pollution if it was outside. It's only still allowed in the United States because we don't have a regulatory format for indoor air pollution. If we did, gas stoves would have been banned a long time ago. But it's just like this big hole in our laws, um, which I think is ironic since we have both in Canada and the United States mostly banned cigarette smoking in restaurants, bars, certainly in airplanes. When I grew up as a kid, there was a smoking section of the airplane, the smoking section of the bus. You were lucky if there was a non-smoking section of a restaurant. We've pretty much done away with all of that, in part because it's visible and stinky. That's what cigarette smoke is. You can see it. You know it's nasty. It's hard to see with gas stoves. All right, so if I've convinced you, I would point you towards these sort of standard issue stoves. What do they cost? This one's $1,300 from LG. I just grabbed these before I gave the presentation today. LG is probably the leading brand of home appliances at the moment. So it's just easy for me to show you. Like the one on the left, this has buttons. It has the one in the middle, and the one on the left has 4 burners. The one in the middle has 5 burners, and it's cheaper, and it has knobs. This is the nature of sales. And I like knobs more. But you can see also the price that it could be, like, $2,100 or $1,800, or in this case, the fancy one on the right-hand side of the copper knobs. Five, oh, it looks like that's 4 burners. Anyway, that's LG's fancy version. They can explain themselves why it costs so much, but it's $2,900. And I think that's pretty standard that you're going to find within as low as $900, maybe for a Frigidaire model. You can get an induction stove, which is to say only like $200 or $300 more than an electric resistance stove once it's at like the $900 range. And then they go up. And so do electric resistance stoves, but I didn't focus on that. I'm focusing on induction because it's so much like gas in the sense that it's instant in the amount of heat that it delivers and controllable. It's like it doesn't have lag time, the heat is instantly there, but so much better than gas. Induction cooks about 3 times as fast for every unit of energy because a gas stove has to burn the energy and most of it escapes around the pan. It heats up your kitchen. It's maybe 20 to 35% efficient at the energy in the stove getting into your food, which has to first go through a pan. Induction makes that has like a copper coil underneath it, and it converts electricity into essentially like a radio wave. It's a very loose photon, and it's all contained, it's shielded, and etc. But even if it wasn't shielded, it can't touch you. It doesn't. It goes literally through all matter, radio waves, and these are slightly bigger, so like 14, 15-foot wide photons, so loose that they just go through everything except ferrous metals, metals that can deal with a magnet will stick to. These kinds of metals have essentially a loose electron on the outside in a very unusual structure. The metals that magnets will stick to that allow them in essence this to absorb the photon and convert it back into energy, and it warms up the pan. If you have other metals that magnets won't stick to, or glass, etc., the induction stove just won't work. It'll not turn on even because they sense whether or not their energy is being received. They're heavily shielded in case you're worried or concerned about EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, because they're everywhere. Um, so they do not. They're shielded because they're producing something so similar to a radio wave that the Federal Communications Commission regulates them as if they were a radio and says you can't interfere with any of our pop radio stations. You have to have this thing be so shielded that you can run this stove next to your radio and there won't be any static. So they're designed for safety. They've been studied by the European Union, like induction, cooking induction has been studied by the European Union, by the Swiss. Everyone says it's safe. It's safe. It's safe. Safer than gas by a long shot. Now, if you're thinking, I don't have $1,200, and I just want to play with this, I just want to practice. Or you're saying, I live in a rental house. I'm not going to be allowed to pull out my stove. Okay, well, I want to show you how to do this. I have had the pleasure of helping a whole bunch of people now electrify their rental kitchen. So first you get a sized cutting board. They sell them online for 40 to 80 bucks, and you put it over the gas burners. Ideally, of course, you would unplug the stove so that the electric lighters can't turn on, or you can shut off the gas in the back so no gas can flow through even if you leave electricity on within the stove. Or you live life a little riskily and you just leave the whole thing there and you just say, I do not use those knobs, and put a piece of tape over them or something. Um, so that's the first step. You put a cutting board over the stove. You just stop using the gas. The next step is that you can get 2 burner or 1 burner induction ranges. So this one on the top, Bistrom, it's currently my favorite that has knobs. I've mentioned before I like knobs. I think they're easier to work with when your hands are messy when you're cooking. Then down and below, New Wave, which is probably the premium product for homes, for just like a 2 burner induction range. It has buttons. It's premium because you can control the temperature in 5-degree increments. So better basically than you can on a gas stove. You can set I like that because I make my hot cocoa at 140 degrees Fahrenheit and I'll set it to 140 Fahrenheit and I'll know that that is just my favorite temperature of hot cocoa. I'm a big hot cocoa fan. So the Bistrom on the top, if you're into knobs like I am, that's the one I might suggest you towards. And if you're more of like a refined culinary expert and you're like, I need to have it, you know, okay, then get a new wave on the bottom potentially. If you want to put your induction burner away, then the air hood is the thinnest one. It's less than an inch thick. Most of these other ones are like 2 inches, 2.5 inches thick. It's less than an inch thick. It's like a laptop, basically, and you can just put it into a drawer. Um, and then on the bottom there, New Wave, they have a very nice wok. You can just plug in into any outlet once again. The person I'm dating right now is of Japanese heritage, and I've done this in her kitchen as well, and she really appreciates having the wok, and she wants me to let you all know that she can get that thing cherry, like red hot, if she wants to on this induction range. There's no issues at all with wok hay. Wok hay being this sort of vaporous layer that's where right next to the wok where it cooks and steams things in this superheated layer of gas that forms around the wok in the like where the oils are vaporizing. It's a certain way of cooking that requires a very hot metal surface like a wok. So it can do wok hay. Are there any questions there? I see in the chat. Oh, I see. Passive House Alberto said, put questions here, or feel free to unmute. And that is still the truth. Okay, so this is your rental kitchen strategy. I'm going to go back to this one and just point out these stoves, you cannot just plug into any outlet. They require a 240 volt, which is twice the voltage of what is in most outlets. It's 120 volt in all the rest of your outlets in your house. Some people call it 110 volt. Some people call it 115 volt. Some people call it 130 volt. It's because the voltage is actually delivered in all those ranges through the same system. So you might measure 115 volt in your outlet, or you might measure 120. And so similarly, these are 240 volts, or roughly between like 230 and 250. They just call it 240 volt, okay? So these are 240 volts. They take a bigger, thicker coil of wire in your wall, like a bigger wire, thicker wire, to deliver more electricity at a higher power. It costs usually about $500 to $600 Canadian to deliver that new wire if you don't have it in your wall in a house. It's around there. Someone has to work for a few hours underneath your house or in your attic or something or other to deliver a new wire so you can plug it in. And so these do not require that. You can plug them into the existing circuits in your kitchen. And side note, personal story. So my mother-in-law, she helped us, my wife and I, she helped us get this gas stove into the house like in 2015 or so. It was an antique. I was so excited because I had more insulation in it. I'm an energy person. It's like, cool, it's 1950s chamber stove with a thermal well, and I was so excited as a gas stove. Nan, my ex-mother-in-law now, she died in 2017 in the Santa Rosa fire, which was one of the first fires in California to have mass casualties, 2017. And that was very traumatic. Santa Rosa is about 4 hours from where I live. That's where my wife grew up. And neighborhoods were burnt down. Many people died. And so after Nan died, dragged that stove, that fudging stove, out of my house. Damaged the floor in the meantime, dented some things, but got the stove out of my house and started cooking on 120 volt induction and have been ever since. I'm going to show you some options. If you do have just a 120 volt outlet, I'm going to show you some options that are full-blown stoves, but this is how I cook. I also have countertop ovens. I don't have a slide for that, I apologize, but Oster, Breville, a whole bunch of brands make nice ovens that you can plug in and cook anything in. They're just plug in on your countertop. But I have been working for years with NYSERDA, which is New York State of New York, and the City of New York, to create a standard for what would it look like if we had a stove, a full-blown stove, but it was just really energy efficient with like insulation and using induction burners. And instead of having five, we just had three, you know? Could we plug that into any outlet in the wall using 120 volt? So New York City put out a challenge and they said, hey, anyone who comes up with this solution, we'll promise you 10,000 stoves of sales. We have like 200,000 to replace. and copper, which I'll show you this next slide. Copper here, this stove here, and Summit have answered the challenge. I'm showing you Summit first because these stoves are like $1,300 to $2,000. They do not have a battery, which copper stoves do, and copper stoves are $6,000. So this stove at the $1,400 $2,000 range, I'm just sort of like I started with rentals, right? These are $100 to $200. This is 14 to 2,000, kind of normal stove range. Three burners, um, a 3 cubic foot oven, not 5 cubic feet. It's actually a superior oven, heats up faster, is easier to control, a smaller oven. The old-fashioned ovens, like from the 50s and 60s, those were usually 2 cubic foot. So this is still much larger than old-fashioned stoves, like the Chambers that I had, that people pursue to this day as like, ooh, fancy, pretty old stove. So it's got a bigger oven than the old-fashioned ones. And yeah, they use power management, so you can use like 600 watts in the oven and still have 1,200 watts for cooking on of the total 1,800 watts that you're allowed to use in any 120-volt outlet in your kitchen or the rest of your house. 1,800 watts is the most that any appliance, like a hair dryer, is supposed to use if it plugs into the wall. So 1,800 watts, and you have a three burner, 3 cubic foot stove. And there's 5 models coming out. They're for sale next spring from Summit. It's an appliance company in New York City. They're out of Queens, but they, manufacture globally, but sell in the United States. And they're making them in 20 inches, 24 inches, and 30 inches. Now, copper. These are first out of the gate. This guy Tucker up here on the upper left-hand corner, he started this company because he was a battery enthusiast and he was trying to figure out some way to use a battery that could take advantage of battery tax credits and sort of the movement around incorporating batteries into things. So he and some other folks invented this cool company called Copper, and they built this beautiful stove. This one, they have like even wood knobs. They don't only have wood knobs, but they're trying to show like, hey, this is a nice stove. And it's got 5 cubic foot oven, 4 standard burners, and a 5 kilowatt hour battery underneath it. 5 kilowatt hours is a lot, actually. That's enough to cook for a few days. You might use a kilowatt hour in a day of cooking. Maybe two, maybe three. It entirely depends on how you cook. But we've installed 36 of them in tribal homes around here where people will have power outages that go on. And we've found that a really ambitious cook will run out of electricity in about 3 days of cooking on the stove without power. We have Lisa Sundberg as an example. And that's great. That's 3 days that you wouldn't have with an electric stove before. It does raise the cost of the stove. It's a $6,000 stove, even though it's more, if you were to buy it or sell it on the open market, it'd probably be more like a $2,000 or $3,000 stove. A nice stove, but it's the battery that raises the cost, but also offers the amenity of being able to cook off grid, to have problems be just solved because you have a battery, as if you had like a Tesla Powerwall or an LG Chem battery on your house. But it's just in your kitchen, just for your stove. So yeah, we installed 36 of them in tribal houses, and it worked out great. We replaced propane stoves and electric resistant stoves, and people are happy. Now, I've just given you a couple options saying like, okay, if you are only going to plug into your wall 120 volt, this is one option. It's a 120-volt stove, and it like charges the battery, and then the battery is used to create the power for the whole stove. So you got 9,600 watts of delivered power. And this one, it's only 1,800 watts, plugs into your wall, and all it ever delivers 1,800 watts. Now, I want to show you a solution that's kind of a hybrid. I mentioned earlier how 100 amps was delivered to every house starting in 1962. So this is an example. It's a double wide, so it's two pieces of house that are stitched together back in 1973, I think it is, this bigger one. So manufactured in a factory, not a high grade of house. Nope, but a house. And then there's a garage next to it. This is in a neighboring town, and a local engineering professor volunteered for us to show and win a contest, show how to do two houses on 100 amps and make them all electric. So in the house that's the small house that you see there, the underneath it says in green, it says 700 square foot garage conversion to one bed house. The appliance is physically above that green bar. That's what we used. And you can see here the countertop oven and then the countertop induction range, both 120 volt. Just that's how this small house cooks food. It's great. That's how I cook food. It's great. Then the bigger house, we have a standard like LG induction stove, and we had to do something about its power demand, which is it's a 50 amp circuit, it's a 40 amp draw that's on the 50 amp circuit, and we have 100 amps. We're like that puts us over the limit. We're gonna have to do something. So we got with a circuit splitter, or also called a smart splitter. A What it is it's a transfer switch. You either use one appliance or the other, and this one's smart, so it allows you to use both. In this case, what it's doing is it is allowing the stove and the heat pump for the HVAC system, this Mr. Cool heat pump here, to use the same physical wire, even though one is a 40 amp draw and the other one is a 20 amp draw, and 40 plus 20 is 60. So this 50 amp circuit is being shared by two devices that add up to more than 50. And it's being done legally, safely, everything with a transfer switch. This NeoCharge is the brand on this one. They're a couple $100 on Amazon. It's a 50 amp NeoCharge. So it's one outlet. You plug this box into it, and then it becomes the outlet. And you have two appliances that plug into it. One's the stove, one's the HVAC system. Could have been an EV charger in the stove. It could have been other things. But just for this product, this example, stove and HVAC. And let's say that you are running the stove full blast and you are running the HVAC system full blast. Then one or the other has to turn off. And that would be the way they chose. They said, we'll turn off the HVAC system because we're only going to be cooking full blast if that was even happening for maybe 10 minutes. Like, how do you put 4 burners on boil and run the oven at the same time? Who does that? How? I mean, like, what would you be cooking with 4 things on boil? Maybe like pressure cooking, canning in fall with like lots of pressure canners all at once, and you're baking I don't know. It's just crazy. How to even do it is the challenge. But if you were, then it would turn off the HVAC system. But otherwise, the two of them can share the same circuit code compliantly, even though they're more than 50 amps because of that circuit splitter there. And so that was our solution. So we could plug in the stove. It's sort of our last little strategy. It's the biggest power demand at 40 amps. Everything else, even if it was a higher power demand, is nothing goes past 40 amps usually. All right, so here's barbecuing. That house I was just showing you, this is the backyard. And we got the professor, he has a restricted diet, and so he likes to eat a lot of chicken. And so we got him an outside barbecue, electric from Weber. He loves it, cooks on it almost every day, he says. You can cook it, you can grill inside now because it's electric. It's not like charcoal grills and such. You can get your seared burgers. Here on the right-hand side, this is a higher power version, bigger cord into it. So people will like build outside patios and such and then wire it for 240-volt electricity and get a bigger barbecue to do more food. The amount of power you have limits the amount of food you can cook. More power, more food, less power, less food. But this is a real thing. We had a barbecue over at the house to celebrate Ramel and Dylan here in the photo. You can see Ramel and Dylan in this photo as well. They're my buddies. We work together on all sorts of good projects, field installations. And yeah, so we cooked like dinner for 6 or something on that barbecue, grilled the corn, did the burgers and the hot dogs and everything. It was plenty for us. And there's lots of brands for electric barbecues. Now, how about cooking while car camping? On the left-hand side, this is a kit that you can order online that plugs into your Tesla over in the back of it. It's a little wooden kit with electricity and such, and you can see there's a sort of a camp stove here on this 2-burner induction range that is a part of it. You can see its electrical lines coming out, plugs into your Tesla. And then here on the right-hand side, you can see Rivian, which comes with a full-blown kitchen built into it. You slide out. This is not a kit. This comes with your Rivian. And 2 big induction burners on it and prep space and all the rest of it and silverware and everything you need just pops right out of this electric Rivian truck. You see them camping. And then cooking while yachting. So if you're on a boat, it's dangerous to have open flames. If there's a fire, where are you gonna go? Right? And now this is a really neat yacht because it can go on just solar and batteries about 100 miles a day. This is the Silent 120. It's $12 million. Dollars. They make Silent 80s, which are 80 feet long, for $8 million. Dollars. And they make Silent 60s for $6 million. Dollars. This is the big one. It's 3 stories tall. It has a helicopter pad. It has a 40 kilowatt solar array up on the roof. And that 40 kW will send you across the open ocean 100 miles a day. You're like, well, how fast is that really? Well, it's 3 times as fast as if you were sailing, with just a sail. And it's 1/3 as fast as if you were gunning it with gasoline. All right? So it's in between. But you can go on solar and then big batteries in the basement and runs the whole facility, your 6 bedrooms. Out pops your submersible, and it comes with an electric submarine. The other side literally has these compartments. You walk down the stairs there, and then there's like a little hoist that drops your submarine in the water. You can get into it and such. And they also have electric jet skis made by Tega. This is a U-boat, makes this U-boat works, makes the little submarines. And then also, of course, they have an electric galley to cook. And so it depends upon the model that you get, but 2, 4, 6 burners and seating for 12 and the rest of it, and a hot tub and a movie theater and and so you know how the wealthy usually get the coolest toys first. And in this case, the coolest toys are the electric ones because when you're out on a yacht, no, it's not fun to inhale gas smoke from your jet engines down below, and you do. You can smell it. It sucks. It's not fun to have like a little electric cooker in your kitchen because you can die from that. That happens not infrequently when people like will put their boat into dock and they'll live in their boat. And if they make the mistake of having a gas stove in there, those little rooms are so tight that you can kill yourself with the carbon monoxide component of a gas stove. And people do. They'll just build up too much air pollution in there and they get real sleepy, really sleepy. Same thing can happen like with a water heater backing up its carbon monoxide into your residence if like there's wind blowing or there's a crack in the pipe or something, and you can die. You can die from the air pollution from your gas water heater or from your stoves. So pretty real. And so rich folks, they do this. They get the solar arrays, the batteries, and they head out on the ocean, completely self-sufficient. Don't need to dock for gasoline ever. Just dock for food. And that is the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions or comments or whatever, I'm more than happy to revisit any of the topics that I've covered here, the products, the warning, don't cook on gas. And if you do, try to use your hood. Your hood will only capture maybe 30% of the nitrogen dioxide, or NOx, because there's other nitrogen oxide products there. But NOx is the catch-all, and nitrogen dioxide is the one that's mostly regulated. So yeah, use your hood, open your window, hope for the best, get your electric stove as fast as you can. um, yeah, here for you.
Excellent. Yeah,
Thanks,
excellent.
Frank.
Thank you very much, Sean. Yeah, if there is any questions, feel free to unmute or put them in. I guess one question that's kind of put in beforehand, just kind of going back to the electromagnetic waves, and
Yeah.
we've heard or I've heard comments that some induction stoves kind of hum. So can you kind of speak to kind of both those concerns? Are they missed? Does it happen? How do you make it not happen? Stuff like that.
Good. Okay, those are all good questions. So the electronics within stoves can be higher quality or lower quality. So Frigidaire, for instance, with their cheapest, lowest quality stove, still a stove, just like you have inexpensive gas stoves and inexpensive electric resistant stoves. And they can have like as small as like a 4-inch or 5-inch burner. I'm just telling you, like, what does a not good stove looks like? It has a very small induction coil, and they have not controlled for the harmonics because if you have good electronics, they don't make any noises, no buzzes, no whines. But some induction stoves, low quality ones, if you turn them on high and you're a child, you can probably hear some sort of whine or whistle. I had three small kids when I first started testing these, and they would tell me like, "No, no, turn that one off," and then the other one would be like, "No, it's fine." It's not like all of them or anything. It's just low quality ones generally will make an audible or inaudible to you noise, a whine. Sometimes similarly, the electronics can cause a pot or a pan to make a like a sort of a buzzing noise, a vibration sound. Also a sign of like not a great product. You know, it's not supposed to do that. High quality ones, you do not have those issues. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, the price point matters in terms of how much money they've put into making each component of it tested and working right. And that's just true for any product that you get. And
Hey,
that
hey,
in turn is why I'm like, hey, just so you know, LG has a very strong reputation for putting out quality products. Um, oh, hey, looks like Ben Druce. You said very interesting presentation. Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks for saying so. We moved to an induction stove last year. We had to get some new pots and pans, but otherwise we are enjoying the instant heat and easy cleanup of spills. We also have an EV with the power management device which the charger plugs into due to the 100 amp service. Everything works great. That's awesome. What a great story, Ben. So, yeah, people do have to get new pots and pans sometimes. Um, and if you are in the market for them, the right thing I think to do these days is to get ceramic coated. So, in the old days, we had cast iron pans. I still love them. And they, over time, they make a essentially like a smooth, sealed surface that you can cook on as a more or less non-stick. And then there's stainless steel pans, and those will work for induction, but they are kind of sticky. Other people like them for various reasons, but I'm not a big fan just because of the cleanup issue with them. So then you go to Teflon. Teflon is a dangerous substance. Its creation creates permanent, like the forever chemicals. Teflon is one of the worst offenders of creating forever chemicals and contaminating groundwater around manufacturing facilities that people drink. So, not a fan of Teflon. Second problem with Teflon, my wife's bird died from Teflon. If you have a gas stove or an electric stove, it can easily get to 1400 degrees, either of them, up to 3000 degrees, but easily up to 1400 degrees. Teflon starts smoking into a dangerous hydrocarbon that's rich with chlorine, dangerous chemicals. It starts smoking at about 475 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. At that point, you should run out of the room. That chemical will burn your lungs and you'll never recover. That's the kind of stuff that like Lushenko was poisoned with over in Russia. It turns into dioxins. It's what Russian dictators use to poison their opposition, dioxins. It turns your skin green and you seriously like rot from the inside. It is such a poisonous chemical. So, I was bringing this forward because if you have an apartment complex, usually the first person who will come to your rescue if your kitchen's on fire is your neighbors. And if not your neighbors, then the site manager will come in with the fire extinguisher to try to rescue. This happens before the fire department shows up, usually. And this is fact. This is how apartment complexes is what happens. People try to, save themselves and their neighbors because they're all sharing walls. The problem with that is that if you run into an apartment where you have a pan that's smoking dioxin smoke, it will permanently harm you. And so I know of a landlord, his cousin was the asset manager, and on two occasions he ran into a senior citizen's apartment, two different senior citizens' apartments, where their Teflon pan was burning, and he has permanent lung damage from trying to be a hero. He'll never be the same again. He inhaled too much dioxin. He's precancerous at this point, but he's done permanent damage to his lungs. That stuff is no joking around. So avoid Teflon is my point, and instead go to ceramic coatings. Ceramic coating means like that's the enamel that's on a mug. And they'll do the same thing. They'll dip a piece of metal into an enamel that is, heat safe. It's essentially a rock and mineral. but it does not emit forever chemicals. It is not a combination of chlorines and benzenes and a whole bunch of crazy ass chemicals that your body cannot digest in a safe way. So do that. Get like Farberware or Green Pan. There's a bunch of them out there that now that offer ceramic coatings on induction ready pans, and you're not gonna regret that because you have a non-stick coating that's fabulous. It's a lightweight pan, so it's easier to handle. Heat is great. Heat distribution is great. It's safe. Safe for any stove for that matter. Get that for your electric resistance stove also. Just for safety's sake, don't use non-stick coverings. Non-stick is by definition going to be a Teflon coating or something like it that's made out of plastics. Teflon is plastic. That is what it is, a plastic coating. It's a high temperature plastic designed so that your food doesn't stick to it. But it is plastic. And so you're burning plastic on your pan. Don't use it. That's my point.
Um,
Um,
I guess
Go ahead.
maybe a follow-up to that one.
Yes.
I thought I heard somewhere that some inductions are actually kind of smart or have a safety feature that if they're left on high for too long, they turn off so that they don't often melt and start fires in your kitchen.
Yeah, they have multiple safety functions actually. I love them because there's a small computer inside that's paying attention. So, for example, you have the pan and you lift it off the burner, it turns off the burner. That's nice. No other stove does that, but immediately just turns it off for you. Okay. So let's say that you leave the pan on and you turn it on to sear on high stake heat. Okay, you do that on any other burner, you turn it on high, and it will get up to, like I said, 1400 degrees to 3000 degrees. Induction stoves are smart and they limit the temperature to 450 to 550, usually below the temperature of Teflon smoking. They just don't allow the temperature to get hotter and they can sense the temperature. They have like a feedback loop of how much energy is being absorbed by the pan and its temperature. So that's the second thing. Like this new wave on the bottom, it says 575. That means it cannot get hotter than 575 on the pan, right at the edge of where Teflon becomes very dangerous. So I'm not saying you should. I already told you, don't use Teflon. But that's a second safety measure is that it doesn't get hotter than 575. Third one, it usually has timers on it so that if you walk away from your burner and it's at 575, so that you put a cast iron pan on it and you just forgot, something happened, you walked away. Usually it'll turn the pan off no matter what at either 30 minutes or an hour. I find that a little bit annoying, but basically I'll just set the timer and then it leaves it on for as long as I ask it to. But if I don't set the timer, it's like, an hour has passed. We should turn this burner off. Um, so that's the third one. Like the internal timers, internal sensors, to turn things off, internal temperature constraints so they can't get hot enough to burn your house down. All good stuff. This is the modern, safer way of cooking. Yeah. Oh, one thing I didn't mention about the safety is that because it's only the pan that gets hot, it's the metal in the pan that heats up. It's not the glass that gets hot. I mean, it might get hot because the pan's touching the glass, but the glass doesn't have any interaction with the induction energy. So it doesn't get hot because of induction. It gets hot because the pan got hot. Well, what that means is that you can touch the stove right next to where the burner is, and it's not hot. You can like drop chocolate chips on the cooktop and it doesn't melt. They're not hot. You take the pan off, and the glass there is hot, but it's not wicked hot. And it cools off quickly because there isn't a radiant electric resistance coil underneath it that's keeping the glass hot, like the way with radiant stoves are. So it's just a much safer experience. There's so many fewer ways to get burned or to start fires. It's no open flame, for instance. Even electric resistance coil, that's so hot that if you drop a paper towel on an electric resistance coil to catch it on fire, that does not happen with induction. And people do. I have a friend who cooks on a wok, which is kind of a little bit splattery, he says. So what he does is he puts a towel, like a full-blown bath towel, on the countertop and underneath the pan in this induction like cooktop thing here. His is built in, but just imagine you put a towel underneath that bowl, put the pan on top of it, and then the towel continues. And so he's got his whole countertop covered in a towel, including the induction burner itself. And that's how he cooks on his wok. And yes, the towel, his fabric towel, gets a little brown and toasty underneath it, but he's like, that's worth it. It's fine. That towel's just used for that. Um, and it's so much cleaner, he finds. So that's an example of how the fire risk is so much reduced with induction. Even when it's on full blast hot, it's just not as hot as a gas or an electric resistant stove get, which is all needlessly, dangerously hot. You know, a steak, if you're cooking a steak at above 450 degrees, like searing it above 450 degrees, you're truly just blackening it. You're not even searing it. You're just burning it into that like hard carbonized style. Like you can blacken a steak on induction, but you're not going to ruin it unless you leave it there too long. Um, yeah, it's just a safer, appropriate lower temperature. Sorry if I'm gabbing on that thing, but I
That's
love
okay.
that.
Yeah, we're getting near the end. Any other questions from the audience? If not, maybe going back to just the EMF one more time. Is there any like testing on stoves to show how much EMF they do output?
Yeah, let me share my paper on this topic. I the chair of the California Energy Commission's wife was worried about EMFs. And so I said, all right, this is a big deal. I'm gonna have to do some study on this so that I can show her the science. So this is my company's website for all of our science papers that we publish. And I'm scrolling down through like guides to how to electrify your home, and here you see one that's talking about the stove and such. This is lots of science. Just give me a second here. I'm getting to the one on induction stoves. Cooking energy usage. Okay. And then here we go. Characterizing the electromagnetic fields and testing of induction ranges. So let's hit publication. Make it big for y'all. So here's an example of how the FCC tests an induction range. You can see that, how there's this huge, like almost 15-foot tall signal here. And it's in this gigantic room and it's trying to see, does this release a radio wave or is this appropriately shielded? And they all have to pass the test of appropriately shielded before they're allowed for sale. So I'm going to shrink it and I'll show you this is what's inside this copper coil. Copper coil is releasing this radio wave up to the pan. Now, this is an illustration that I don't think that's terrific, but you can just see there's the coil, there's the waves that are going up and down all at the same time. It's shielded though on the inside. This idea of what is electromagnetic radiation, and they are photons. All electromagnetic radiation can be described as a photon. It's like a either a very tiny little particle, like what you use when you're at the dentist for x-rays, or it can be a very wide, floaty particle, like radio waves, that really look and act more like a field, like just a wave, but they are photons. So this idea that photons of electromagnetism are classified into two broad groups by physicists based on whether they have enough energy to break a molecular bond, which is called ionizing. Ultraviolet photons cause cancer because they have enough energy to break molecular bonds. Figure 4 illustrates that magnetic waves used by induction stoves have what is that, trillionth as much energy as visible light, way, way less, and cannot influence molecular bonds. Okay? So this is the non-ionizing range where it does not break molecular bonds in your body. And you can see like microwaves are here, cell phones, right? People think about cell phones a little bit like, oh, the EMS from a cell phone. Here's your radio waves, which most people think is just fine to have a radio in their house, absorbing the radio waves that are going through the house. And at an even lower, less impactful, less ionizing is where inductions are at 25 to 50 kilohertz versus like 87 to 108 megahertz for FM radio and lower 520 to 11610 kilohertz, which is less power for AM radio. So it's way, way less power than even the radio waves that we're all bathed in at all moments from our sun and from, of course, radio's towers. So non-ionizing does not break molecular bonds and is about as low energy as you can get on the scale. Hopefully that helps reassure some people. And then I'm going to put this into this link into the chat. If that's cool with y'all. If any of you are interested in reading this paper in more detail, just so you can talk with people about what is induction, there it is for you. Yeah, and so they've studied it on pregnant women. They've studied it on people with pacemakers, etc. They've studied it. Um, and here's the basic. If there are health risks, what would you do? So it says to minimize the risk of an unlikely and as yet unknown health impact from induction ranges. The Swiss, which is like the leading agency studying this, they say this is what you do to reduce impact from something that we don't think has any impact. They say maintain a 2-inch distance from the range to decrease the risk of electric induction in the body, which they put it out at 1/50th the power that would trigger you to be shocked. 1/50th, right? 2%. So there's no risk, but that's what you do if you were trying to get even less risky. And if you had a medical device, talk with your doctor. But basically, it means don't use metal and cooking utensils, just in case somehow the pan was able to deliver a shock through the metal cooking utensil, but it doesn't and won't, but just in case, right? You wouldn't use a metal cooking utensil. Of course, you use certified induction ready cookware and use the right diameter of cookware for the range to limit stray magnetic fields. Put the pan down so it covers the induction coil. Frequently, induction coils will shrink their impact if you have a smaller pan, but just in case, you know. All right, I gotta jump.
Yeah.
You all have to jump too. That was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sean, for your excellent and very informative talk about induction stoves and their health impacts. And thank you all for coming for this month's Passive House Building Better in Alberta webinar, sponsored by Alberta EcoTrust and NVEX. Have a good day.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.